Ever feel like experts looking at the same information, can end up at totally different conclusions?
Yeah.
Well, it's not just you.
Right.
Today, we're going on a deep dive
Okay.
into this whole world of noise,
Okay.
this hidden flaw in how humans judge things that impacts
Yeah.
just about everything.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we're going to be looking at the book, Noise,
Yeah.
A Flaw in Human Judgment by Cass Sunstein and Daniel Kahneman.
Okay.
And hopefully by the end of this, you'll understand what noise is,
Yeah.
why it even matters, and how to start recognizing it and maybe even reducing it
Right.
in your own life.
Interesting.
So to get started, what exactly is noise?
Well, that's a great place to start because it's
Yeah.
really easy to get noise confused with bias, but they're totally different things.
Okay.
So think about like a target
Yeah.
bias is consistently hitting off center,
Okay.
always missing the bullseye in the same way.
It's in the same way.
Yeah, but noise is more like scatter.
Yeah.
Sometimes you hit the mark.
Okay.
Sometimes you're just all over the place, even though you were aiming for the same spot.
So it's about like inconsistency, even when you're trying to be objective.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And one of the ways that we uncover this hidden variability is something called a noise audit.
A noise audit.
Yeah. And the book gives a really compelling example from an insurance company that did just that.
Okay.
They asked their underwriters to, quote, premiums for similar risks, expecting some variation, of course.
Right.
But what they found was really shocking.
What happened? What did they discover?
Well, they were astonished to find that the variability in the quotes was 5 times larger than they thought it would be.
Wow. 5 times.
5 times? That's a huge discrepancy.
It is.
Why is this noise problem such a big deal? Like, why do we need to be aware of this?
Well, for one thing, it's incredibly costly.
Yeah.
So in the case of the insurance company, that variability really impacted their bottom line,
Yeah.
potentially costing them millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Right, because if they're quoting wildly different prices for similar risks,
Exactly.
then they're either losing business or losing money because of those inaccurate quotes.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But even beyond the financial stuff,
Okay.
noise also can lead to unfairness
Okay.
because it means that people in similar situations are treated differently.
So whether someone gets a harsh or lenient sentence or a correct diagnosis or even a job offer could just come down to pure chance.
Unfortunately, yes.
How?
And this inconsistency can undermine the credibility of whole systems because when expert judgments are kind of all over the map,
Yeah.
it just erodes trust in the system itself.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how this is all fitting together now.
Good.
The book also talks about different types of noise.
Right.
Can you break those down for us?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So they identify 3 main types:
Okay.
level noise, pattern noise, and occasion noise.
Okay.
So let's start with level noise.
Okay.
Imagine different judges handling the same case. Some judges are just consistently harsher in their sentencing, while others are more lenient, even though they're looking at the same crime.
So it's about the average level of the judgments that they make over time?
Right.
Like some judges are just stricter than others on average?
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, pattern noise is a little different. So 2 judges might agree on like the average severity of the sentences.
Okay.
But they might consistently rank different cases differently. It's all about the personal, the idiosyncratic responses to the specifics of the case.
So even if their average severity is the same, their patterns of judgment might reveal a lot about them.
Exactly. And then finally, we've got occasion noise,
Okay.
which is perhaps the most fascinating one.
Okay.
This is the variability in judgment that comes from all those seemingly irrelevant factors.
What do you mean?
So imagine the same judge
Yeah.
evaluating the same case on different days.
Okay.
Their mood, how much sleep they got, even the order that they reviewed information could affect their decision.
Hold on.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that something as simple as whether or not the judge had their coffee that morning could actually sway a decision?
Yeah.
That's a little unsettling.
It might sound surprising,
Yeah.
but research actually backs it up.
Really?
Yeah, our brains are always searching for coherence.
Right.
And this can lead to some pretty interesting quirks.
Right. I'm intrigued. So let's dive into the psychology of noise then.
Okay.
What is going on in our brains that makes us so susceptible to this?
So one fascinating finding is that our brains tend to match intensities across different scales,
Okay.
even when those scales are totally unrelated.
What does that mean?
So for example,
Yeah.
imagine trying to predict someone's future salary
Okay.
based solely on their height.
I see where you're going with this.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to connect those two things.
Exactly.
Like at all.
But our brains just crave these connections. We
Ah.
try to create a narrative, even if it's not accurate. And this leads to another important idea,
Okay.
what we call the illusion of validity.
Okay.
So feeling confident about a judgment doesn't actually mean it's accurate.
Ouch.
Yeah.
I think we've all fallen into that trap.
I think we all have.
More than once.
Yeah, the truth is that what we call objective ignorance, like the inherent uncertainty of the future, plays a huge role in our judgments. We just tend to underestimate how much we just don't know.
Right.
We fill in the gaps with assumptions,
Yeah.
and then we get overly confident in those assumptions.
We're essentially just making things up as we go along,
Yeah.
and then feeling really sure about those made-up stories.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Wow.
And this tendency to overestimate our predictive abilities, it's everywhere,
Really?
from our everyday decisions to expert judgments.
Okay, so we've got the theory down, but I'm curious how this all plays out in the real world.
Sure.
Can you give us some real-world examples of noise in action?
Definitely. So one that comes to mind is a study from 1974 that looked at sentencing in the criminal justice system.
Okay.
They found startling variations in the sentences given by different judges for the same hypothetical crimes.
So same crime, different judges, wildly different outcomes,
Exactly.
just based on who they happen to have as their judge.
Pretty much.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah, it really highlighted how much influence those individual judges' biases and tendencies can have on something as critical as sentencing decisions.
Justice shouldn't be a lottery.
It's a sobering thought.
It is.
And this inconsistency isn't limited to judges.
Okay.
Even highly trained experts like fingerprint analysts.
Fingerprint analysis.
Yeah.
I always thought that was like the gold standard of evidence.
Right.
It seems so objective.
It's often presented that way.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's much more complex.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So a study by A.T.L. Dror showed that fingerprint experts could actually change their conclusions about the same fingerprints when they were given misleading information.
What kind of misleading information?
Things like being told that the suspect had confessed.
Oh.
Or that the fingerprints came from a really high-profile case.
Oh, so like extra information that shouldn't matter.
Exactly.
But does
But it can subconsciously influence even the most trained eye.
So even in a field where we expect total objectivity, these subtle influences can slip in and create noise.
Exactly.
Wow, that's incredible.
It really highlights the fact that even experts are human. Their judgments are susceptible to all these cognitive biases and the noise that they generate.
Yeah.
It's just a crucial reminder that we need to be aware of these vulnerabilities.
Okay.
Even in fields that seem totally objective.
Wow, this is fascinating.
It is.
So we've uncovered this whole problem of noise, and it's kind of like it's everywhere.
Yeah.
But what can we actually do about it?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Is there any way to like fight back against this human flaw?
Absolutely.
Really?
The book talks about this concept called decision hygiene.
Okay.
And it offers some practical strategies to try to reduce noise.
Okay. Decision hygiene. I like that.
Yeah.
It sounds like something we should all be doing.
Right.
Like flossing for your brain.
Yeah.
So where do we start?
Well, one powerful technique is averaging judgments.
Averaging judgments.
Yeah. It leverages that wisdom of crowds idea.
Okay.
So that independent judgments tend to cancel out each other's noise.
So instead of relying on one person,
Exactly.
you get multiple perspectives and it balances things out.
Right. And it's not just about the quantity of judgments.
Right.
It's about the independence of those judgments.
Okay.
So when people make judgments independently,
Yeah.
they're less likely to be swayed by the same biases.
Oh, so you don't want them to like influence each other?
Exactly. You want to avoid falling into that trap of groupthink.
Yeah.
Where everyone's just agreeing with the loudest voice.
Yeah, makes sense.
Another important strategy is structured decision-making.
Okay, structured decision-making, what is that?
Well, it involves breaking down a complex judgment into smaller steps, more manageable steps.
So instead of trying to make a big, complicated decision all at once,
Right.
you kind of create a framework.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you clearly define the problem, you identify the key factors to consider,
Okay.
gather information independently on each of those factors,
Right.
and then you make your final judgment based on that assessment.
It sounds like a much more systematic,
Yes.
less error-prone way to make decisions.
Right.
Are there any real-world examples of this structured decision-making?
Oh, a great example is the APGAR score.
APGAR score.
Yeah.
What's that?
Oh, you haven't heard of that.
Oh, yeah.
It's used to assess the health of newborn babies.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I remember that from when my kids were born.
Right.
It seems so straightforward.
Yeah.
I never thought about it as like a way to reduce noise, though.
Well, it's a classic example of a structured decision-making tool.
Okay.
So instead of just relying on one doctor's overall impression of the baby's health,
Right.
the APGAR score breaks it down into 5 categories.
What are they?
Appearance, pulse, grimace, activity, and respiration.
Oh, okay. So each of those categories then has like a clear scoring system.
Right.
So it's not up to like random interpretation.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's how it helps reduce that noise from subjective assessments.
It's amazing how something so simple can have such a big impact. It really shows the power of guidelines and a structured process.
Absolutely.
Okay. Or another thing I wanted to touch on from the world of forecasting.
Yeah.
Are these super forecasters?
Ah, yes.
You mentioned them before. Those are the people who are really good at predicting world events.
Yes. They're consistently better.
Better than even the experts.
Even the experts.
Okay, so how do they do that? What's their secret?
Well, one thing is that they're really open-minded.
Okay.
They're constantly updating their beliefs.
Based on new information.
Based on new information.
Okay.
And they're totally willing to change their minds when the evidence suggests they should.
So they're not afraid to admit they're wrong.
Exactly.
And they're willing to learn.
Right. They embrace what's called perpetual beta.
Perpetual beta?
Yeah.
What is that?
It's like a commitment to continuous learning and improvement.
I love that phrase, perpetual beta.
Yeah.
It's like we're all works in progress.
Exactly.
Always evolving.
Yeah.
Refining our understanding of the world. I think that's a good way to approach life in general.
I agree.
Yeah. So this has been such an eye-opening conversation.
Good.
I'm already starting to see noise everywhere in my own life, in the world around me.
Yeah. It can be a bit overwhelming.
It is.
Yeah.
What is like the one key takeaway you want people to remember?
I think the most important thing is just awareness. Once you understand that noise is everywhere, that it affects even the smartest people, you start to see the world differently.
I can see that.
You begin to question things.
Yeah.
And look for ways to reduce the influence of noise in your own decisions.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of unsettling.
It can be.
But knowledge is power, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Okay.
And remember, reducing noise isn't about eliminating our judgment.
Okay.
It's about making those judgments more accurate, fairer, more reliable.
Yeah.
It's about really acknowledging our biases and taking steps to minimize their impact.
So striving for objectivity.
Exactly.
And realizing that we all make these mistakes.
Right.
And try to improve.
Yes. And as we talked about, there are practical steps that we can all take to improve that decision hygiene.
Yeah. This is really interesting stuff.
It is.
I think a lot of people are going to walk away from this.
Yeah.
And think about things a little bit differently.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, it's not something we think about all the time.
Right. It flies under the radar.
But it's really important.
But it has such a big impact on how we see the world.
So this has been a really fascinating deep dive into noise.
Good.
Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
And sharing all this with us.
Yeah. And remember, reducing noise is an ongoing effort. There's always more to learn.
Okay.
More to question. And more to improve.
Well, this has been great.
Good.
But we're going to leave it here.
Okay.
What is one final thought that you want to leave everyone with?
Here's something to think about.
Okay.
Now that you know about noise.
Yeah.
Think about all the conclusions you've made, the assumptions you've had, even the strong beliefs that you hold.
Okay.
How might noise have played a role in shaping those things?
Yeah, it's like we need to do a noise audit on ourselves.
Well, exactly.
Go through our thinking and try to see where those inconsistencies are.
Yeah, and as you start to think about those assumptions, think about how you can incorporate those decision hygiene strategies into your own life.
Like how to minimize the noise.
Right.
And make better decisions.
Exactly. Whether it's seeking out different perspectives or using structured decision-making or just being aware of our biases, there are things we can do to become better decision makers.
I think a lot of people are going to come away from this with a whole new perspective on how they make decisions.
I hope so.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is.
Yeah.
It's important.
Well, this has been a really amazing journey into noise.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I did. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course.
And for sharing all this with us.
It's been my pleasure.
And remember, everyone.
Yeah.
Reducing noise is a constant thing.
Right. It's ongoing.
you know?
There's always more to learn.
Always more to question.
More to question and more to improve.
Well, on that note, we'll leave you to think about all the ways that noise might be affecting you.
Okay, sounds good.
Until next time, keep diving deep.